If you could live green, would you? I'm Nick Federoff, host of Things Green, where we introduce nuggets of green lifestyle from gardening, upcycling, answering your questions, sustainability, even discussing environmental issues. You can become more confident in making the right decisions for you and your family. So come along as we are Things Green. Today we're going to do something that's really kind of fun. If you've had kids or if you're a kid at heart, the chances are you've probably had toys laying around. And what better way to preserve those memories than making planters out of toys? Now these toys right here are actually used for work. They're remote control toys, and we use them until they just aren't usable any longer. And like I said, all good things must come to an end. So whether you're using something that is like this, or it could be any configuration of a toy, first and foremost, you want to get it out of the weather, i.e., and the reason for this is because we don't want mosquitoes to come around. Toys are notorious for breeding mosquitoes. Any kind of water that's in there, if it's a quarter of an inch, you can get mosquitoes in that, so knock them out. But we're going to use these for planter beds, and one of the things that we'll have to make sure is that there is drainage in these. So get a drill and drill a bunch of holes here, there, and everywhere. Wherever you think water is going to get stuck inside nooks and crannies, then make sure you do that, okay? Or if you're going to use this for an indoor application, you could do the same, or you can leave it the way it is. But what you're going to have to do is just to make certain that you don't overwater the plants. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is find the toy. I'm going to use this dump truck, like this. This is really cool. Now what I did is I ended up getting myself I got myself a butterfly, and this butterfly is from our friends at InStyle Steel, and they have these steel products, and they allow them to rust naturally. I really like that idea because it gives a different kind of a hue to it, and you really don't have to take care of it. It lasts a super long time. So what I did is I took and I bent this for this particular application because the truck is nice, but I wanted just to put a little bit of extra decoration into it. So I bent it so it sits, well, like obviously it sits like this. You can put whatever you want. That's the best thing about this whole thing. There are no rules. Do what you want. Make yourself feel good. And you could move things, and you could put different kind of plants, and it really just doesn't matter. Okay, so we have this right here. I'm actually absolutely digging it. The second thing we're going to want to do is make sure that we have a good potting soil. So I like a well-draining potting soil. This one happens to have some perlite in here, and the perlite is going to really help with the water conservation that's necessary for this. It's going to hold water. Perlite is like a volcanic rock almost. It's really tiny. It's the little white stuff that's in here. And if you look under in a microscope, it has little nooks and crannies where water will hide. And then when roots need it, it'll make its way into there. And before you know it, you've got yourself some really good plants because they're absorbing the water from there. Okay. So you can use plants that are already rooted out. And if you're going to use plants that are rooted out, by the way, you want to make sure this is patted down a little bit. So it's already rooted out and plant them in here. But we're going to do something fun by just walking around in the neighborhood, and we're going to get some succulents. Now these succulents are what we call herbaceous plants. Herbaceous plants are plants that have a lot of moisture in them. So succulents are absolutely good for that. So for instance, if you were to get something like this jade plant, or you could have this African purslane, Another plant would be any kind of ice plant, Aptinia. These are all good plants to have. So when you end up going in this direction, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to, well, where we're going to start first? Well, I picked up the jade plant first. So if I was to take this and just cut it straight at the bottom like this, technically we would want it to sit a couple of days, but you know what? These things are so resilient. It's really not going to matter. And then you could take this off right here. We can actually plant this whole thing in here just like this. Just stick it in and it will probably grow and root. It'll take a while, but you know what? I want my plants to be just a little bit on the smaller side. So I'm going to take and, well, let's snip it off right here. And then I'm going to snip a little bit more over here. And then I'm going to take a couple of these leaves off. And oddly enough, these things root so well that you could actually take this leaf right here, stick it inside some soil, and it will grow some roots. That's the beauty of some of these succulents. You don't have to really baby them a whole lot. So let's get, I'm going to put this one right here because it is a bigger kind of plant. So he's going to stick it in like that. The next thing I'm going to get is, oh, by the way, this is kind of cool. So I've got this and I have plants. You could dump them in there. All right, so I'm liking this. This right here is an echeveria. Very, very popular, beautiful blooms on this thing. But here in this particular instance, we're going to keep them small. We're not going to grow them so that they get blooms. So all I'm doing is taking off some of the leaves on the bottom. And once again, and as I mentioned, if you can wait a day or two after collecting these and get them, like here we go. This one right here, this right here is a good one. This one's been hardened off. This one, yeah, this one's hardened off too. See like this? It has a callus on there. So these are all really good plants to install. Here's another one hardened off. Okay, so let's put this one right in here. And then I love this. You know why I really like this is because this is an edible plant. This one comes out of Africa, and if you were a giraffe, you can actually eat that. It's very sour, by the way. So let us trim this one off as well. Remove all this. And look at the different textures and colors that we have going on over here. That's why I'm really digging on this. We have different colors, different textures. What else do I have in my grab bag? All right, here we have some. This right here is ice plant. Again, you have to. Now this one is interesting because many ice plants, you can lose these things very easily. So you have to kind of be careful around these. And we're gonna just stick that in there like that. And okay, so this particular cactus, it's pokey. I actually pulled this out. I pulled the root and all out. You could stick that in there, and you can tell how it grows. It just grows real nice and long like this. But I like it in the small when it's smaller. So what we're going to do is we're going to really prune this up. See this? And let's put this one. Yeah, let's put this one way over here. Okay. Do I have any more? Here's a different kind of ice plant. See the difference in the two? We have two different styles. This one looks like it's already calloused up. Okay, let's do this one back here. Now, I do have one more plant, and I really love this. This is a cactus. This cactus is so cool. I've shown this cactus one other time on one other show when we did our popcorn planter. Because this stuff right here is actually called the peanut cactus. Anyway, so you just take these little things, and these right here fall apart so easily, it's ridiculous. So you got to be careful. We're going to take this and we're going to train it to grow over here, right here. This one actually should be probably on the end like this. This will start growing downwards like this. It'll get little babies on the sides. It's really a cool cactus. You don't have to bury it that deep. Now, if you wanted to use any rooting hormone, you can. Rooting hormone helps stimulate the plants to grow. But I'm telling you, these things, they probably don't need it all the time. In fact, I normally don't use it, okay? So here we have some rocks. Don't be afraid. I mean, you could use just that. That's why I actually left this right here, because what is a big old truck like this without having rocks? This is a rock hauling thing. So we're going to make a riverbed out of this. Isn't this cool? Now this is something you could do with the kids, obviously. Preserving those memories. You could do it anytime. Hey, you know what? This would make a really good gift for people. So it's something to think about as well. If you want to make this as a gift, maybe somebody in your life has a backhoe service or something like that, or they're truckers. You could take and you could do this as well. You could do this with new toys. Used toys are really good because you already have them. So yeah, look at that. We used all the rocks. So now we have, I'm going to make a little bit more of a serpentine going here. So we have our river going like this. We have all the cacti going over here, or I should say herbaceous plants. Do you remember what herbaceous means? It means it has a lot of moisture to it. And we're going to take and clean this up a little bit. Now what we have to do is keep this thing watered. Now, how are we going to water this if it's indoors? If it's indoors, or even if it's out there, you can put this on a porch. You can put this in. At first, I would put it in morning sunlight. Don't let it get afternoon sunlight because it is going to dry out quite a bit. You want to moisten this up. What I would do is I would use a pump sprayer to moisten the soil as well as moistening the plants. Saturate it really well like this. And then you're going to come back for a while, test it. Look at the soil. You remember what I always say? Soil should be moist, like if you were to take a sponge, squeeze a sponge out, and when you open it up, that wrung out sponge is moist. It's the same concept with this right here. And then as these things start getting established, they're going to use a whole lot less water. But isn't this just kind of a cute, fun thing that you can do? So I would take and I would water it like this. See, if we were to take a hose and stick a hose in here, I think that would be way too much water for this. But in this particular instance, we are controlling exactly the amount of water that we want in here. My soil was a little bit on the dry side, so that's why I'm going a little extra right here. And we're not making any divots with the watering, with the hose. So I think that right there is just uber awesome. And just imagine giving this as a gift, putting it on the porch. It preserves the memories that you saw your kids playing with something like this. If you want to use multiple toys, you could do so. You can take and you could put maybe rocks in something like this and put them together. Here I just have these plants right here. Go like that. So everything complements each other. So remember, in order to preserve something like this and preserve those memories, it's really simple. It doesn't cost hardly any money, and it's something that you can do, and you can do it with your loved ones as well. I have no idea what he's looking at. It just looks like a piece of firewood, isn't it?
It is, in a way. So it's a piece of dead wood that's been attacked by invasive shot-hole borers, an invasive pest.
Invasive shot-hole borer. How do you know that's what's in there?
All right. So if you look at this, is a sycamore tree. Mm-hmm. So these holes in here are the entry holes of the beetles. If you don't mind, I'm gonna take the. So these are the beetles.
These little tiny little things.
Yes, those tiny little things
that I brought in here.
Sorta. So these guys bore into the wood.
Okay.
And once they get inside, they start making all of these galleries. And they bring with them a fungus. And they actually don't eat the wood, the beetles. They eat the fungus. But the fungus starts colonizing the wood and generates a disease in the tree. It's called Fusarium dieback. And then the disease sort of clogs the vascular system of the tree, and the tree ends up dying.
Okay.
So the beetles are a vector of the disease.
So did this obviously came from the tree. This side was cut
Yes.
on the bottom, but did this break off?
Yes.
And that was because of the damage.
Exactly. This is a combination of the physical damage, of all the galleries, plus the whole structure of the wood has been compromised because it was all colonized by the fungus. So
it's a double whammy. It's two things.
it's a two things. So when you're trying to control this, you have to control a fungus and a beetle.
Okay.
So it makes it a little bit more complicated. And the other thing is, it adds more hazards because when you have a tree with a branch like this and it breaks and it falls on your head, it can create a lot of damage.
So how many of these little guys actually got into here to do this amount of damage?
Ooh, in this particular piece, I don't know, but for a heavily or severely infested trees, you can have like 10,000 of these. Yes.
Wow, that's a lot. Where do these come from?
They come from Southeast Asia.
Okay.
We think they came most possibly in wood packing materials. The pellets that come with all the good things that we import from Asia. And they just arrived here, and they are not very picky. They like many different species of tree. So we have our urban forest that has so many things to offer. And so they quickly start spreading and become a pest in here.
So they don't have a discriminating palate. They'll pretty much latch on to things. So what's interesting, how do we, first, do we control them or do we kill them off?
We're not in a position to eradicate anymore.
Really?
That ship has sailed already.
No.
Yes, sadly. That's why early detection of any pest is super important. That the earliest you find it, the more chances you have of eradicating it. But in this case, they're quite widespread, so we're managing them. That's our focus, is managing and containing, because they're all here in Southern California, but we don't want them to spread more. So we want to keep in here. And actually, we learned that if you take care of it and you're on top of it, you can manage them quite successfully, but you have to be on top of it.
Okay, so what does a managing process look like?
So first you have to do a lot of monitoring. Make sure you find which trees are infested and find them when they start getting infested, not once they are heavily infested. Then we have options.
Whoa, wait a minute. If you've got 10,000 of these things in there, how do you know that there's 10,000 in there?
I mean, that's just kind of a guess. Not every tree has 10,000. But what you do is that you go around and you look at your trees and you look how many of those exit holes you find. Okay. Right. And in general, you classify your tree as a lightly infested trees. They have less than 50 holes, or moderately or heavily infested. So usually more than 150 holes, we start considering that a heavily infested tree. And for most species, it takes several years for the beetles to actually start killing the tree. So it might take about 4 years for a sycamore to succumb to an infestation of shadow borers. And that was one of the problems. If the tree's not dying, no one's doing nothing. And so once the tree starts dying, they start calling us like, hey, we have this problem, and we kind of have sometimes tell them it's too late.
Okay, so a lot of times when you have a borer of some sort, you get gummosis. And is that for every tree, or would that happen, or does that even happen with this particular critter?
It doesn't happen with every tree. It just depends on the tree. So every tree responds kind of differently to the attack. Like we get hurt and we bleed, and we all bleed. But the way a tree bleeds, it might be different species. Some trees gum, and you get all that thick resin coming out. And actually, those trees tend to be a little bit more resistant to this pest. But some others don't have such a thick resin, and they just weep, like sycamores do that. And so in those cases, instead of seeing the gum, you see kind of like a wet staining on the bark. When you'll see that when many trees get hurt. Or avocados is another host of this pest. Avocados just create this sugary stuff that looks like a sugar volcano, but it could be the shadow borers, or it could be anything else that is damaging them. So you have to be careful and look for the exit hole.
Okay. So once we find them, does that mean that the that the fungus is inside as well, or has the fungus even manifested itself? And then once we do find it, how do we know how to treat it?
So if they have the beetles, usually have the fungus. The beetles bring the fungus with them. So she has like some special pockets in the base of her mouth with where she collects the fungus. And so when she goes and starts a new gallery, a new colony, she brings the fungus with her. So if there's beetles, there's fungus. And how do you manage? Well, we studied that pretty intensively. So you have to be on top of it. You can prune infested branches and get rid of most of the beetles. So as long as you bring the populations down to a lightly infested, usually you can let nature take its turn. But, pruning is good. Removing any amplifier tree, which is like severely infested trees, those trees, no matter what you do, they tend not to survive anyways. So you're removing those trees, and as I said, they could have 10,000 beetles. So you remove 10,000 beetles out of the population, it gives the other trees some chance. And then if you have really high value trees, you can use some insecticide or fungicide, but we usually tend to keep that as a last resource, right? It's just for very high value trees or a situation where you cannot control them other ways.
So that's also a good time when you could, if you're really out of your sorts, hire somebody who knows how to do tree surgery or eradication, and they can maybe use an enclosed system or something like that to treat the trees. And of course, a little bit of water and fertilizer wouldn't hurt either, would it?
No, good irrigation and good tree and cultural practices to manage your trees is the best way to protect them. Yeah. With fertilizer, actually, I'll be a little bit cautious about it, because fertilizer might make the trees a little bit more susceptible to pests. So fertilizer is fine if the tree needs it, right? But if the tree doesn't need it, it's better not to put extra fertilizer.
Okay, so if a tree is having problems, isn't that kind of like saying that it is lacking? So then you should fertilize it?
Not necessarily. If it has pest problems, it doesn't mean that it's lacking something. It's like if you get the flu, it doesn't mean that you're missing any vitamins, right? So it's kind of the same idea.
She's a PhD, so I'm going with that one. Okay, come on over here. We have a menagerie of different insects that are over here. I don't know if there's a sheen over here or not. So normally when we think of beetles, the thing that most people think of are these critters in the upper left-hand corner. That's a beetle. But the ones you showed me are almost microscopic.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between them?
They're just different species. Actually, some of them are very closely related. Like, look at these ones are also kind of what you would think of beetles, just have very long nose. Mm-hmm. Those are weevils, same as the shadow porters, which are weevils as well, you can barely see them in here.
Oh my goodness, they are tiny.
So they're like close cousins, if you want, but they come in different sizes.
Okay. And what are some of the things that we should be worried about inside of here that we would find around in our homes and garden?
Sure. So let me show you what this is an example of all kinds of beetles that can move on firewood, right? So, and some of them are not beetles, like the spotted lanternfly is not really a beetle. It's just pests. So any of these can move on firewood, and these ones that say invader are the ones that are invaders here in California. And a lot of them just arrive here in some sort of firewood way. There's also other beetles that are native to here, so you'll also find them sometimes as pests or not, but are native to here they are in firewood. But the idea is when you move firewood from one place to another, you can move a pest. So, for example, these ones over here, the gold-spotted oak borer, are native to Arizona. They're fine over there. They just don't do much damage. They came here to California in firewood, and they're invasive here. So let's say we go camping, and we grab some pine wood that has this western pine beetle, and we take it to Arizona. Now, it's native to California, but it's not native to Arizona. So we're
going to suck it back to you. That's what we're going to do, Arizona.
So basically the main message here is don't move firewood. If you're going camping or anything, just buy the firewood locally. That is the best way. The best thing you can do to protect your forest is don't move firewood from one place to another.
Well, obviously we have a lot more to talk about, and we'll have to do that at a different time, but thank you for allowing us to come over here and invade your privacy and sharing the information with us.
Yeah, thanks for your interest.